We have driven through several checkpoints with these goods without tax stamp from Aplau through to Dabala to Segakope without being flagged. Our movement through these checkpoints was smooth until the customs officials in her mid-30s flagged us to stop at the Sugakope checkpoint. The investigative team assumed this customs official who stopped us was to inspect these goods would get us to pay taxes on the assorted drinks. But we were in for a shocker. She demanded the team pay a bribe of 400 cedis. She allowed us to pay 200 cedis after some minutes of negotiations. I have succeeded in meeting one of the smuggling kingpins in Elubo, who identified himself as Error. For every box of rice he brings from Ivory Coast to Ghana, he charges 20 cedis. It is this amount he pays off to customs officials he works with to facilitate his business. If he can transport 500 bags of rice to Elubo, he will earn 10,000 cedis.
Me charge there saying, and you ever say be about 300, number 320. In the meantime, the DM measure 500 bags. It's me draw no match. The customs one and see a very modern. I know about 20 cedis in man, maybe 20 cedis. I didn't no problem.
The investigative team decided to test these claims made by the traders and commercial drivers. We bought several boxes of rice from neighboring La Côte d'Ivoire. At the Elubo border post, this customs official, who was identified as Kujo, allowed our boxes of rice bought from La Côte d'Ivoire into Ghana. We did not pay the statutory taxes. When the team got to the customs checkpoint at Samir, our vehicle was inspected by two customs officials. They asked me to follow them to their office. They demanded I paid a bribe of 20 cedis and left me to go with the boxes of rice.
So I'm going to celebrate small S-man.
What do you have?
Rice.
How much?
3.
You are going to use it.
I'll just come to my pastor. And then other people.
If you play for one.
We are in the festive.
The driver should know better.
I think
he picks you, he informs you, then he takes me. I'll dash you one and pay for the 2.
The 2, how much will I pay? 20. Thank you very much.
Here's the book for me to read.
Hey, thank you very much.
My number is 11.
I thought you were coming to give me receipt.
Oh. But the receipt when you pay the duty.
Ah,
the duty is 1,170.
Welcome back, and of course we get into our big stories now. It has to do with that latest Hotline documentary, our investigative piece, Porous Borders, and you saw in your shot what exactly is happening. Yesterday, when the question was posed to the boss in Parliament, when that committee was sitting, he did make mention of the fact that they would try to get more visuals, watch the entirety of this documentary and find out whether these were actually their officers or officials, which made for very interesting listening. But joining the conversation this morning as we delve into this, we have Abdallah Ali Nachia, managing partner of Ali Nachia and Associates. He's a tax expert and he speaks to the issues. Later, we'll have joining the conversation Adam Senanu, who is with the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. But Mr. Ali Nache, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
It's a real pleasure having my former lecturer join the conversation this morning. Thank you so much, sir. So let's get into this issue. It's not the first time it's happening, but I know you have some peculiar insight into this matter. Please share that with us before we get into what this means for our tax system as a country.
Thank you very much. As authors have always said, taxation appears a complex area. And talking about border patrols and smuggling as part of the issues we face called illicit financial flows, this is a little of concern. Maybe some people will be looking at the quantum and think these are little amounts. Maybe we've not seen the huge ones. And as the saying goes, little drops of taxes make a mighty nation anyway. But in trying to look at issues bordering on taxes and losses and smuggling, we need to look at the history. We should not forget in Ghana we used to have what we call the border guard unit, who were attached to the military. Indeed, a lot of them were military officers and had their own command structure, just as we had for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. And if you remember, we had the General Utuka heading the place, we had Brigadier General Gumel at a point in time. And we also had the former Army Commander, Major General Adisa Opoku, who used to be one of their heads. So over the years, you realize that they got disbanded and integrated into the regular military, as it were. Some were already military officers. Then the issue about patrolling the borders to prevent the movement of goods and services fell under customs. And we used to call it customs, excise, and preventive service. So that was the preventive wing. So we say that over the years, when we are doing reforms, we shouldn't forget what segments of a unit, an establishment do. Because as customs, excise, and preventive, if we relapse and get concentrating on customs and excise, we may leave the preventive to suffer, and these things may come about.
Is that what you're seeing now? Before you go on, is that what you're seeing now? Are we growing lax on the preventive aspect of things?
I would think so, because you realize that if you look at the preventive, these smuggling operations can sometimes be dangerous because they may be armed. So you have the preventive unit trained and armed to patrol the borders, be at checkpoints to prevent this illicit flow through smuggling. Today, if you look at recruitment, I think at a point in time, there was even agitation that why are we taking military men or assigning military men to customs, forgetting that they go to the preventive wing. Because if you come out, excuse me, if you are a graduate banking and finance, you join customs, they say go to the border post with your arms and prevent smuggling. I'm sure you will say, no, that's not what I thought I was coming to do. So over the years, we should have maintained that training, even if we take on people who are prepared to be in the preventive. Are we conscientizing them? Are we training them on the purpose for which they are there? Again, even when we've done that, we need to look at that issue of regular movement and changing the cycle of the people at certain posts. The saying is that familiarity breeds contempt. The person is there, he's known by everybody. He gets there, oh, how are you? Well, how far? You see, that familiarity is not the issue, but is it making you concentrate on checking the person? And over the years, we had immigration also training and now having border patrols also to check movement of persons. I remember there was an incident of a clash between customs and immigration patrols. And I remember reading an article by Captain Nkrabiefa that explaining that this shouldn't happen. You all have your mandate. You are monitoring and preventing illicit flow of goods. You are checking, preventing illicit move of persons. When did persons become goods? And when did goods become persons? So you are to collaborate with each other, because an illicit movement of goods, the goods are not on their own. They are being carried by persons. So if a person is arrested or intercepted by an immigration officer and he has on him uncustomed goods, these should be brought to the attention of their colleagues at customs to take charge of that angle, and they can continue with processing it. So if you go to borders, you find both teams there, and they have their mandate. So the more we have these clashes, we give a leeway for the people who would want to engage in that also to continue.
Right.
And I have been asking that in this day and age, we are doing digitalization. Is it not the time we invest in some drones that can monitor for us? When the people would just monitor the images the drone is projecting to them, then they can intercept. We have been successful in using drones in zip line to drop medicine. Can't we deploy and see how it can help us to monitor movements? In fact, that is why the documentary says porous. You may not be able to patrol every nook and cranny of our borders, but at least the drones will tell us which section of the border the incident is rife. Then we can concentrate, because anytime they change their route, we will be able to get information. Again, we had issues with informants. People were bringing information on these activities. Question is, where is their informant's award? There is a reward, which is always touted by the GRA, that if you give us information on loss of revenue, you're entitled to some amount. Sometimes the informants have the challenge of being exposed by people they may have also given information to, making their life risky.
Right.
2, some have challenge on getting the amounts promised in the law or in the practice directions of the revenue. So they relax. And now, instead of telling us where we are losing the revenue and how we are losing it, they will go to the other side and take the money so they don't even report. So we need to address facets of all these to be able to deal with the border issues. And I keep saying, irrespective of the route a person uses, no matter how porous, he will enter a town. And that is where the informants will be able to know. I've seen a truck discharging certain goods at this location, and then the officials can approach and verify. And so that is what it is. And if you remember, there was a directive, for example, addressing the issue of smuggling of fuel, where there was suspension of giving permits to people to operate filling stations in towns closer to the border, because investigation and informants made the officials aware that trucks can come in from neighboring countries with little fuel in their tanks, buy the fuel, and then drive back. You may not know that that is fuel they were smuggling. You only saw a truck that came and said, well, I didn't get any goods to load, I'm going back. And they filled their tank. How would you identify that? But over the years, they got to know and said, okay, we are not going to have stations closer. So if you come deeper in and buy, before you get to the border, the fuel is gone. Would you continue that smuggling route? You would not. So we need to identify bits and pieces and address them. It is not easy patrolling. The borders are really porous, except we know only the designated point.
Right.
And now, even in the designated point, then we need to look at addressing issues of staff morale, rewards, training, and the conscientization. That because if we talk of illicit financial flows, this is one of them.
You talk about staff training and all that. If you've noticed, there appears to be a sort of trend. Of course, there are very good customs officers. There are very good immigration officers in there. But there seems to be a trend as well where this has been sort of normalized, these corrupt activities, maybe even institutionalized. Is there a way of training that can lead to fewer incidents of these? Because this is not the first time. This is not the first documentary on this. We've done this time and again. And every time you see similar incidents. Some people are getting through, crossing the border after having paid 20 cedis. 20 cedis. And these could be terrorists. Of course, we can talk about the tax losses to our country and all of that. I mean, I don't know what your take is on that.
Exactly why you still now have the immigration aspect of the patrols. And what we need, as I indicated, is the issue of collaboration, because as you indicated, these persons moving could be terrorists. And then how do you know that? How do you know whether the person has even the documents to move? And then you are also looking at ECOWAS protocols on free movement of persons. So these are challenges that need the collaborative effort of both sides. Because if the person is coming in with uncustomed goods or moving without documentation, he came from another side. What is the protocol arrangements with the other side to ensure that we work in tandem with one another? Because, as we say, the world is a global village. And then if you look at the quantum, when we talk about corruption and all these, you will realize that the report of SHRAG and Ghana Integrity Initiative and the National Anti-Corruption Coalition indicates we are losing close to $3 billion every year through corruption. And these are some of the corrupt acts: smuggling, paying your way out. It's part of all these. And so if you look at this quantum, which is just close to or even more than what we are going for from IMF, because IMF is $3 billion for 3 years. This is $3 billion for 1 year. So net loss is $2 billion a year. We've not even talked about the illicit flows, because all the illicit financial flows for mining, for example, these small-scale miners, we ask, these galamsey operators, we hear, where does the gold go? They may also be crossing borders to trade it in neighboring countries. Otherwise, where is the statistics or data showing that their outputs are part of the exports of gold and other minerals we are working on?
Right.
So we have a bigger challenge in terms of, we may not see only the rice. There may be so many other valuable items crossing the borders without the duties and the due process.
And that's a crucial point you make, because even in the past, we've known how our gold, Ghana would be saying, oh, we exported this amount of gold. Yet some other countries would be saying, we got these amounts, telling you that a lot of it went out of our borders through smuggling. But do hold for us briefly, Dr. Ali Nachia. Let's also bring in Sweetie Edem Senunu, anti-graft campaigner on this.
Citizens' movements against corruption. And Edem, let's explore the angle of bribery and corruption. This documentary has revealed a high occurrence of bribery and corruption involving custom officials. And like Ben said, and listening to Dr. Ali Nachia reiterates that this isn't new. This isn't the first time we're experiencing this. So this, first of all, suggests that there's a systemic issue of failure within the border management and customs of enforcement, as well as challenges in enforcement and accountability. How do you argue? What's your argument? You have to unmute for us, please.
I am unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that I think that would be an accurate assessment of where we find ourselves. Part of the challenge is not having passed the COPO, the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which would have codified a lot more detail in terms of sanctions that you apply when public officers fail to align with their mandate. Whether there was a giving of money, of a favor, of a promise, which is a bribe to influence the decision of that public officer, or it was extortion, because when the public officer compels you by force to give something, that's still corruption. These are all manifestations of an abuse of entrusted power for private gain. And ideally, we would have clearly spelled out laws on what sanctions should be applied. At the moment, except for the codes of conducts that exist, which are not at the law level, there's not legislation. There's not enough detail on the kind of sanctions, except that obviously it's a breach of the responsibilities assigned to the officer. And it is a good enough means for which they can be sanctioned by their institution. And because we are not enforcing enough, and a law would have made it even much more better in terms of the enforcement options. And then we would have, the repeat offenders being clear in their mind that, look, if we attempt this thing, we are going to lose our jobs. But there's not enough precedent to serve as a deterrent, and that's where we find ourselves.
But how effective then have previous anti-corruption, measures been in curbing this menace? If they, as we speak, you say there are no clear sanctions, would you say that the previous anti-corruption measures have just also failed?
Well, yes, in one sense, we have not, in terms of the enforcement part, it's not in terms of identifying what is wrong. We all know what is wrong. And it's the reason why a law that even breaks much more further what the various elements of wrongdoing are and what the punishments for these specific wrongdoings are, such that a court of competent jurisdiction could take the cases up and persons investigating would know what to file. That's a major gap we have now. As some of you may know, the COPO has been before a cabinet for quite some time, and civil society has been trying to impress on government that move this back to the legislature so that it can be passed and we have a clear law. Again, that law would be looking at the issues such as lifestyle audits that we have been concerned about. So in terms of understanding what is going wrong, there's clear information on that. But in terms of providing a basis for, sanctions, for the law to crack the whip and persons to be found culpable and punished adequately to serve as a deterrent, we do not seem to have, properly done that, and we are failing in that regard.
Right. Yesterday, I listened to Major General B.K. Owuna, the Ghana Revenue Authority. I think he's in charge of customs at the Ghana Revenue Authority, and he says that the problem is not, they're not oblivious about the problem, and they're going to conduct a full-scale investigation and then proceed to punish those culprits if it turns out that they're actually part of customs. How do you respond to that? Is that the right step we should be taking now? Launch a full-scale investigation and find out who's culpable and then proceed to punish them?
I think that would not be the ultimate response. Unless you have something that is sustainable, that is continuously done, and that could only be that you have institutionalized a mechanism where, for example, where we talk about mystery shopping, undercover agents, we ought to have a system that continuously does. They should not take a JoyNews investigation to come back to this issue. So it is not a once in a blue moon incident of we do an investigation and find people culpable and then we go to sleep. That will not work. So really, we would need much more than what he's offering at the moment. We should be clear in our minds which unit within SEPS, within the police structure, within all our structures, will continuously take up this responsibility and go beyond just the issue of we found a group of people, we've sanctioned them at this point, and then after that, everything seems like it's honky-dory.
Well, he also added that they are going to be training their officers, geospatial intelligence training for custom officials. That is like educating them and equipping them to handle issues like this. So perhaps that's what we should be looking forward to, and how that could also help curb the menace. Do you agree?
That definitely provides a much more compelling basis to sustain checking on such things. Because yes, if you're using technology, for example, the drones quietly observing, collecting data, the fact that these drones can go around randomly, the fact that they would have a system in place to use the current, institutional rules in terms of what staff can do and not do, to sanction and to let go of persons who are not, as it were, promoting the best interest of the nation. I think that would be a much more sustainable thing. So if he fleshes that out some more, and we are clear the kind of partnerships they will get and how that system will be run, and that it will be a permanent unit within, their setup, that definitely will be a much more compelling way to go.
Right, thank you. Benjamin, this is what we have. And I think we should also talk about the security issue in all of this, because there are so many things that are not being checked, being smuggled into the country. These fizzy drinks, energy drinks that have not been approved by the FDA.
Which could be dangerous to people's health.
20 Ghana cedis to bring this into the country. I don't know what Dr. Linachia thinks about this, but let's find out. Doc, what do you think about the security aspect of this? How some of these goods and products can cause serious implications on the health of citizens?
Yes, I think that is the concern, because if you look at the usual, what I would call usual normal route of importation, you will find, apart from customs officials, you'll find people from the Food and Drugs Authority, you find Ghana Standards Authority to certify. Now, if you look at this approach, it means that there is no certification, our health concerns are at risk and all that. But again, if you listen to the tape, you find that when they asked what is this rice about, he said, I'm going to celebrate Christmas with it. Of course, an officer may think this quantity for a household, or it's something that is not taxable or otherwise. So we also need to appreciate where the issue is coming from. If there were a vast load of rice, I'm not sure he would have treated it the way it was. But that is not to defend what was done. But a little look at the conversation. What are you using it from? Just for Christmas or something? But like I said, little drops of taxes make a mighty nation. And it was not only about the quantum, but also looking at the incident and your office and what is expected of you as a job function. Are you reneging on what you need to do? So those are the concerns. And I know people may think, what is 20 cities against huge corruption and scandals on procurement and all that? It tells us how, as I was listening to co-chair Mr. Demsenano, if we don't deal with it holistically, people will look at other aspects of corruption and start making comparisons. What is this compared to that? So we have a bigger issue of dealing with corruption.
Right.
Well, Dr. Nachi, I just want to find out from you, looking at some of these incidents, you've come face to face with some of these incidents before, one involving someone smuggling some items. Would you like to share that story with us?
Yes, I was told of a story of a man that the officials will see riding a bike across the border. In the morning, he goes to the other side. And then by evening, you find him riding back home. They will search his bag. He's not carrying anything. Just a few items he bought, then he will pass by. It kept going on for a long time till a customs officer on instinct said, can I ask you a question? He said, go ahead. He said, you know what? The way you keep going and coming, I'm suspecting that you are smuggling something. but I can't put a finger to it. So if you can let me know what it is you are smuggling that I'm not seeing, I promise you would go. The man looked at him and smiled and said, I'm smuggling bicycles. Then it dawned on them, they don't look at the bike he rides in and out. Apparently, an older bike is ridden across, and then when he's riding back, a new bicycle, but he has taken off everything. So their mind went to it and said, we need to expand our focus on other aspects. So this is how, by observation, by instinct, we are also trained to be able to observe. A normal auditing, all auditors will tell you, if you go for stock taking or asset verification, you look at observation. That is why in stock taking, we go and observe how processes are done. So in the same way, they are training, it's the fact that they are giving all these kind of pointers for them to be able to, so like the people said, oh, just for Christmas. Just to let you know that it is not dutiable because it is not up to commercial quantity, or I'm not using it for commercial purposes. So the question would be then the officers would find out. If you would come back, they will wonder, how many Christmas do you celebrate within a period of a month? Then the instinct would strike. So those are what I think we need to bear in mind as well.
All right. So 2 quick questions. As a taxman, and of course, our nation feeds on these taxes to develop. We are losing, we're bleeding. What can be done from the tax perspective? And I'm talking of officialdom, to stem the tide of these. And then on the other end, again, officialdom, I know we've already touched on corruption becoming endemic within some of these services, but how much more can we do to force them to do the right thing?
I think that it all starts with, 1, recruitment. What do we go through? What do the candidates go through? Is it the cliche job for the boys or party boys being taken on board in any government in time, not a particular government? Those people come with a sense of entitlement. And this is everywhere in recruitment. We need to check this. 2, what is the level of training? Because if the recruitment has a challenge, we have people who are not trainable. They come in with the traits and continue with the traits. They can't be reformed. Mr. Senano mentioned it. If anybody goes against the standard of procedure, what are the sanctions?
Okay.
Are they meted out? Do we ensure? Even if it comes to transfers, some instances are that people think being put at certain border posts is a punishment. Let's get him out of this place. It's not a dumping ground. That is even the core area of our revenue base if it comes to import. So we need a holistic view of that. And then we need to do the rotation and get out the familiarity, and anybody who gets there wants to ensure that, look, nothing wrong goes on with me. Having seen people being punished, people being sanctioned, you will do the right thing. So it is a whole basket of activities that need to be done to protect the revenue.
This is how we're going to cap off the conversation. Sweetie, do you have anything else for Doc?
I think it's we've put everything in perspective now. We need systems that actually work. We need laws, clear laws on sanctions to apply to these issues. But yeah, that's it.
Well, we're grateful to you, Doc, that you took the time to join us for this discussion. Dr. Ali Nachia joining the conversation there. He is partner of Ali Nachia and Associates, Abdallah Ali Nachia. And we also have Edem Senanu, Citizens Movement Against Corruption. We'll be back with more on the subject. Stay with us.
We have driven through several checkpoints with these goods without tax stamp from Aplau through to Dabala to Segakope without being flagged. Our movement through these checkpoints was smooth until the customs officials in her mid-30s flagged us to stop at the Sugakope checkpoint. The investigative team assumed this customs official who stopped us was to inspect these goods would get us to pay taxes on the assorted drinks. But we were in for a shocker. She demanded the team pay a bribe of 400 cedis. She allowed us to pay 200 cedis after some minutes of negotiations. I have succeeded in meeting one of the smuggling kingpins in Elubo, who identified himself as Error. For every box of rice he brings from Ivory Coast to Ghana, he charges 20 cedis. It is this amount he pays off to customs officials he works with to facilitate his business. If he can transport 500 bags of rice to Elubo, he will earn 10,000 cedis.
Me charge there saying, and Baku 20 cities. You ever say be a Baku 300, Memo 320. In the meantime, ne dear, measure bear 500 bags. It's me drew and much cheche. A customs one and see a bear more day. I know the I know about 20 cities in man, maybe 20 cities. I did no problem.
The investigative team decided to test these claims made by the traders and commercial drivers. We bought several boxes of rice from neighboring La Côte d'Ivoire. At the Elubo border post, this customs official, who was identified as Kujo, allowed our boxes of rice bought from La Côte d'Ivoire into Ghana. We did not pay the statutory taxes. When the team got to the customs checkpoint at Samir, our vehicle was inspected by two customs officials. They asked me to follow them to their office. They demanded I paid a bribe of 20 cedis and left me to go with the boxes of rice.
So I'm going to use it to celebrate small X-Man.
What do you have?
Rice.
How much?
3.
You are going to use it.
I'll just down to my pasta. And then other people. We are in the festive. The driver should know better. I think he takes you, he informs you, then he takes me. I'll dash you one and pay for the 2. How much will I pay? 20. Thank you very much. Here's the book for me to read. Hey, thank you very much. My number is I thought you were coming to give me a receipt. Oh. But the receipt when you pay the duty. The duty is
We have driven through several checkpoints with these goods without tax stamp from Aplau through to Dabala to Segakope without being flagged. Our movement through these checkpoints was smooth until the customs officials in her mid-30s flagged us to stop at the Sugakope checkpoint. The investigative team assumed this customs official who stopped us was to inspect these goods would get us to pay taxes on the assorted drinks. But we were in for a shocker. She demanded the team pay a bribe of 400 cedis. She allowed us to pay 200 cedis after some minutes of negotiations.
How much?
I have succeeded in meeting one of the smuggling kingpins in Elubo, who identified himself as Error. For every box of rice he brings from Ivory Coast to Ghana, he charges 20 cedis. It is this amount he pays off to customs officials he works with to facilitate his business. If he can transport 500 bags of rice to Elubo, he will earn 10,000 cedis.
Me charge there saying, and you ever say be about 300, number 320. In the meantime, the dear measure bear 500 bags. It's me drew and much church. A customs one and see a bear more day. I know the 20 cities in man, maybe 20 cities. I didn't know problem.
The investigative team decided to test these claims made by the traders and commercial drivers. We bought several boxes of rice from neighboring La Côte d'Ivoire. At the Elubo border post, this customs official, who was identified as Kujo, allowed our boxes of rice bought from La Côte d'Ivoire into Ghana. We did not pay the statutory taxes. When the team got to the customs checkpoint at Samir, our vehicle was inspected by two customs officials. They asked me to follow them to their office. They demanded I paid a bribe of 20 cedis and left me to go with the boxes of rice.
So I'm going to use it to celebrate small S-man.
What do you have?
Rice.
How much?
3.
You are going to use it.
I'll dash down to my pastor. And then other people.
Typically, one.
It's a small. We are in the festive.
The driver should know better. The moment he picks you, he informs you, then he takes me. I'll dash you one and pay for the 2.
The 2, how much should I pay? 20. Thank you very much.
Here's the book for me to leave.
Hey, thank you very much.
My number is even.
I thought you were coming to give me receipt.
Oh.